For the next several minutes, I want you to think about why you're here. Not why you're here in this building per se, but why you're in a Toastmaster meeting. In 2006, while attending University of Phoenix graduation, I had the privilege to watch one of the greatest motivational speakers there is. Anybody know a gentleman by the name of Les Brown? I had the privilege of watching Les Brown, and as I sat in the audience listening to his message, which I've heard several times before, he began to say, in life, you have to be hungry. And that resonated with me. And as he delivered his message and stood on that stage, I watched Les Brown and I said, wow, I would love to do that. Just so happened at the time I was in a mentoring program at CSX. And my mentor at the time suggested joining Toastmasters. Well, I didn't care anything about that, but he said this would help me on my motivational speaking journey. So that's where I focused. So I came into a Toastmaster door for my first time. And they gave me two manuals, a CC manual and a CL manual. Now those manuals meant nothing to me. All I knew was I wanted to be a motivational speaker. Shortly after that, I was voluntold to be Sergeant in Arms. I fell in love with Toastmasters. I went in for communications. I went in to be a motivational speaker, but I came out finding the other track, leadership. See, I believed in leadership. I believed in the power of unlocking the potential of others. And I fell in love with the leadership portion of it. I came into Toastmasters with a plan. I took that CC manual. I said, well, I'll write these 10 speeches. And every speech I write, it'll be a chapter in a book of mine. And then I'll become a motivational speaker. As I began to write my speeches down, I got evaluation after evaluation. And most people, what they do with speeches, they come in a club like this, they give a speech, they get an evaluation, and they throw that speech away. Not me. I had a plan. I wanted to be a motivational speaker. Every time I got an evaluation from a speech, I would tweak my speech. I would tweak my story. That's all we're doing. We're glorified storytellers. I would tweak my story. And eventually, I took those stories and I put them in my first book. I love quotes. Socrates, one of the greatest philosophers ever, said the unexamined life is not worth living. All those stories that I began to tell, I took a great look at and examined my life. And because I love quotes, I used a quote, I told a story, and then I wrote down the lesson that I learned. That was my first book. Toastmasters helped me do that. I began to go through these tracks in Toastmasters. Communication track, leadership track, and eventually, at the District 84 conference in 2014, I was awarded Distinguished Toastmaster. Or as I like to say, especially to the timer, DTM. Don't time me, sir. Us DTMs, we can get a little long-winded, but that's okay. Like I said, I fell in love with the leadership portion. And I began to watch as I helped other people unlock their potential. I volunteered as the District 84 Train the Trainer, which basically I help people move from telling stories to presenting a message. And they gave me another ribbon to put around my chest. I began competing, first at the club level. And I advanced to the area level. They gave me another trophy. I thought that was great. That was part of my motivation. That was part of my why, because I wanted to be a motivational speaker. I advanced to the district level. I competed in Orlando, Florida, with 8 of the top speakers of our district. This was my constellation prize. I didn't win. I didn't even place. But losing that day was probably one of the best things that ever happened to me. Because as I stood on that stage, looking out at over 400 Toastmaster members, I was able to taste that sweet agony of defeat. And I was reminded of what Les Brown had said years earlier. You got to stay hungry. And see, when I lost that day, it made me even hungrier. It made me want it even more. And I began to get out and speak to organizations. I fell in love with speaking to youth. So I go to high schools, I go to prisons, I go to colleges, even go to churches, anywhere there's a youthful ear. People I can help to unlock their potential. Somewhere along the way, I figured out I could do anything I put my mind to. And I wrote my second book, inspired by Muhammad Ali, who called himself the greatest of all time. I talked about my journey to greatness, and of course that journey included Toastmasters. My GOAT doesn't stand for greatest of all time, but of course that's always the goal, to be the greatest. My GOAT stands for goals, outcome, accountability, and thought process. These 4 areas, if we focus on them, will help us on our journey to achieving greatness. I've gone through my Toastmaster journey, and I visited several clubs. In fact, in 2016, I was what we call the Ambassador of the Year. One of the things I found out on being the Ambassador of the Year is as I met more Toastmasters, when I went to a thing like the District 84 conference, or when I went to a TLI conference, I wasn't just coming to those things to see people. I was coming now to see my friends. See, Toastmasters becomes a family. People like Bushan, who probably doesn't remember me.
I do.
I was his area governor several years ago, as well as division governor. Bushan was a great president, great service provider. This is what Toastmasters is all about. So when we come through those Toastmaster doors, we have to think about why we're here. What do we want to accomplish? And see, we can become the greatest people that we can become. But what good is that if we don't use the leadership portion of it and pour into others and help them to unlock their full potential? Ladies and gentlemen, fellow Toastmasters and guests, from this moment on, I want you to always think about why you're here. What's your motivation for becoming a Toastmaster? What's your reason? See, nothing in life ever happens without a reason. Your job is to always continue to reinvent yourself and always find your why. Toastmasters.